Hey everyone, welcome back. So this video is going to be specifically about the French defense, my my personal mainline weapon against e4. I play it all the time. And so the reason why I'm making a video about this specific variation we're going to be talking about, the Tarrasch French, is because I was just talking to someone about it, and we were having a discussion about it, and they said that they felt the Tarrasch was the best for white and that it can make things very difficult for black. And so that's what motivated me to make this video. So, in theory, I think the Tarrasch is the best for white. But I don't feel that it is the best to play for a win. So, small difference there. And let's put it on the board here so I can show what I think is the best for a win. So, e4, e6, d4, d5, our starting French position here. Knight d2, that leads to our Tarrasch. But before I go into that, I just want to say knight c3 I think is the best to play for a win as white. I feel like that's going to be the most challenging. But I do feel knight d2 is, although not challenging as much for an advantage, it keeps things more flexible, and I feel it's more difficult for black to meet. Because if they go for a certain variation, things can be very difficult for black. But there's this one variation that I play that seems to always lead to a draw, and so I feel like if black plays this way, it's difficult for white to get any advantage. So let's go ahead with it. So there is obviously knight to f6, and that's a main move here, but I go c5, and that's what I like to play here. Knight gf3, and then a lot of people are probably familiar with knight c6 and this variation, and you may see this one, which leads to the isolated queen's pawn position. Black gets activity but has the long-term weakness of the pawn, but the activity will compensate for the weakness, and so if you like to play that way, that's fine, and that's perfectly acceptable. But let's go back here for 1 second to this position after knight g to f3. So, because I don't necessarily like playing with isolated pawns if I can avoid them, so I will take on d4. And e takes d5, and queen takes on d5, just avoiding that isolated pawn. And so this is taken, by the way, that from the game that this game I'm showing is taken from my game against an FM, so FIDE Master. And so after queen takes on d5, you avoid the isolated pawn. And so black's not really going to have any real weaknesses. The downside is white's going to get a lot of time for developing out his pieces, whereas black has only really moved the queen. And you can kind of see that white's already canceled, gotten out most of the pieces, and black has only really moved the queen. So black has to do a lot of catching up. And in addition, there is no real way to hold on to this pawn. Knight c6, knight takes on d4, knight takes c4, and here white does have the choice to take with either the knight or the queen. And I feel, though, that after queen takes d4, queen takes, knight takes, there's very little chance of either side going for a win. I just don't feel like there's too much that can happen. So I think that taking with the knight is actually better if you're playing for a win. But again, this is from an actual game that I played. So bishop d7, and yeah, no real weaknesses, so it's difficult. The only real problems is the lagging behind in development, which eventually I got to catch up a little bit, and then shortly reached a draw after a few more moves. Let's just put these on the board here. and then white offered a draw, game over. Because I don't see much for either side. And again, if it's an FM that I'm playing against, I think that I'm going to take the draw if he offers. Yeah, there's not really too many problems for black. Just sometimes it's difficult to get active, but and finding a place for this bishop can sometimes be difficult. You gotta like rearrange it. And other than the catching up in development and the lagging behind in time, I don't feel that black suffers so much. So that's what I usually like to play against the Tarrasch, against strong opponents. Sometimes if I'm playing against somebody that's maybe not rated so highly, I'll play something a little bit more imbalance making to avoid early exchanges, and this leading to what I consider a pretty drawish position. But other than that, I consider this to be a pretty solid weapon against the Tarrasch. So that's one good option. Alright, so that's going to be it. So thanks for watching. Bye.